Welcome back. In this edition of The Heat, we're discussing the escalating U.S.-China trade conflict. And let's get back to our panel. Dan, why don't I send it to you? The New York Times out with an editorial saying that basically Trump's living in the 1960s when the U.S. had more manufacturing jobs. This is kind of a throwback to a different era. I imagine you take exception to that. But when you look at the evidence, Obama had tire tariffs in 2009, saved about 1,200 jobs, but lost 3,700. The Bush administration had steel tariffs in 2002. They also say that they had to admit that they actually lost more jobs than they actually won. Did tariffs really work?
Well, I think that if the gentleman earlier said that this is perhaps a political strategy as opposed to an economic strategy, and I think that's probably an accurate statement. When Trump was in England recently with the G7, one of the examples that we heard about was that if Jaguar wants to export an automobile from London to Germany, it pays a 10% duty. But if it wants to import a Volkswagen from Germany into London, it's only a 2% duty. And what Trump has been saying all along is that he would like to see no duties. He would like to see no trade protection, that we should have an open and free market. Now, I think it's possible with an open and free market, just the sheer fact that China and the United States have huge economies, we are going to be exporters and importers, and we may import more than we export because of the nature of the size of our economies. But I think that what the president is trying to say, and a lot of people are supporting him, is that we need to think more longer term about how do we work together so that all economies grow as opposed to just two or three.
Yoon, is that going to happen? I mean, where everybody's just going to say one day, let's get rid of our tariffs, let's get rid of our subsidies, let's get rid of all these things that we do to kind of tinker with the economies. It doesn't seem likely, does it?
Well, that is certainly a very idealistic version of what the international economy could look like or should look like. But so far, given all this national interest and how the perceived national interest is involved in this discussion, I just don't see the sovereign nations at this moment will resort to that approach. So that means that each state will still go out to protect their own economic interest. And this, if the Trump administration insists on this policy, then we're going to see these disputes continue.
Paolo, I saw Peter Navarro saying that basically the Chinese aren't taking Trump seriously enough. But then I heard another analyst today saying, I don't think the Trump administration is taking China seriously enough. That even though they may not have as much in terms of trade, they have other mechanisms that could make life difficult for the United States if the U.S. wants to go down this road.
Absolutely. And also, things don't happen in a void. Now, we have the perception of the United States being in a trade war with everybody. You know, Canada, which you mentioned in your intro, after the G7 summit was a disaster, probably the worst in memorable history. The EU, Mexico, everybody, now China. So we have like a fight with the entire world, and in a context right now in which supposedly because of developments in the Korean Peninsula, we need, at least as we've been saying all along, that China holds the cards. So we need Chinese support. Is this the best way to entice China to cooperate with us on admittedly an unrelated issue, which is North Korea, when we are attacking them on the trade front? I mean, this is just not going to, this is not the, I would say, very constructive approach. I agree that the international trade environment is not perfect. The WTO is out there supposedly to help reduce tariffs and non-tariff barriers, and to simplify the international trading system, to have everybody subscribe to the same rules, etc. This is complicated because non-tariff barriers in particular may, impede a normal flow of trade more so than a 2-3% tariff here on this and that. But fundamentally, the United States, if America thinks that it's going to take the lead on this crucial topic by starting a fight with the entire world at the same time, I don't think this is productive, whatever the administration may think. And I don't know who's who's underestimating whom. But these things have a way of turning very badly.
What's the end game if you're fighting with a number of different countries at one time.
Well, you got to win. You say we are the big guy, right? Still, technically, America is the biggest world economy, and we can endure this, as much as we have to, even though the farmers in Iowa or somewhere else stop selling, soybeans to China or whatever else, that they are targeted by the Europeans, that you don't sell bourbon from, Tennessee or whatever that is. So there's definitely going to be more losers than winners, and I don't know who has the stomach to continue this and to escalate this and to see, okay, let's see who has the endurance here, and at the same time destroy the world economy. Let me just say that this is not importing here, exporting there. Boeing, our largest exporter in the United States, imports about 70% of the components of the Dreamliner, okay? Which is to say they depend on a worldwide supply chain of suppliers and vendors, et cetera. This hurts them. Today's Boeing stock was hit hard by this prospect of the trade war with China, and same is Caterpillar, just to name two major American companies that are largely dependent on foreign sales. So the idea that we can rationalize, this is made in China, it doesn't work that way anymore, because of the globalization of businesses. And the idea that you can establish clearly a goal and say, well, we show you we have determination and we're going to win this one. Good luck. I think a lot of trouble ahead.
And Dan, let me get your thoughts on that too, because it is an interconnected world. We are talking about supply chains, a lot of different countries working on these products. What about that aspect of it?
I think it's an important aspect, and I think that the discussion this evening has been terrific, because what it says is that we've been talking about, is it a strategy? Is it an economic power? Is it the United States saying to the rest of the world, we're the biggest guy, and if you want to trade with us, you're going to play on our rules and our sandbox? I don't think so. I think that what the president feels like, he got a message from the American people that they're tired of jobs being shipped overseas and manufacturing plants closed, and he's trying to do something about it. Whether he'll succeed or not remains to be seen. But one thing I think is important for the rest of the world to understand, he does not give up easily. He will fight for the American people, and he'll fight hard.
Zhao Hai, I've got to ask you about the tariffs announced last week, the U.S. administration targeting these high-tech products. What do you make of that?
Well, first of all, I want to say that people in China, we understand that in the U.S. there's a sense of anger, of disillusionment, and also dissatisfaction about the current global trading system, and in particular the trade between U.S. and China. But I want to say that what is going on is actually about global trade and global governance. And it's not just between the U.S. and China, but between U.S. and the world, all the other countries included. So I think the U.S. wanted to particularly target China's high tech because they wanted not that currently China's tech industry is posing grave threat to the U.S., but they expect in the future, with the growth rate of the current China's industry, particularly in high tech, will pose a threat to the American global dominance in high tech sector. So I think that's a sort of preventative war against China's industries, in particularly those high tech industries that's been pointed out in Made in China 2025.
It's interesting, Yoon, I want to ask you about this. He's talking a lot. In fact, he gave an address today. I was listening to him about the unemployment rate. It's historically low, talking about all these great numbers. But the last time the U.S. really embarked on something like this, we had a Republican president. That's what Trump is. Very recalcitrant. He also was a businessman who'd never held elective office, Herbert Hoover. And he went with historically high tariffs. The unemployment rate in 1930, 8%. The unemployment rate in 1931, 16%. The unemployment rate in 1932, 25%. It doesn't really tend to work. I mean, people lose their jobs as a result of this. Do you think the administration understands that, and how far are they willing to go on this?
Well, I think today's economy is very different from the economy 80 years ago. So I think the same logic may apply, but I think we need to make significant adjustment to that expectation. And I know that from the Chinese perspective, there are a lot of arguments that if we target the voters for Trump, if we target for example, the employment rate, target U.S. industrial workers, for the farmers, then it's going to affect the Trump's decision making. But if we look at how the stock market, for example, here in the United States reacts to this announcement, well, it could be possible that the business world is already has already developed this fatigue about new announcement of tariffs against China. Therefore, they don't react very much. But I think if we look at the approval rating of President Trump, it remains very strong, and it remains pretty high compared to his predecessors. So I think looking from this perspective, I think the Chinese strategy to target the domestic voter base of President Trump needs some reassessment.
What do you make of it, Paulo?
Well, look, one can try to, how can I say, to divide it and try to glean profound strategies in all this. This is kind of making it up as you go, quite frankly. And I don't really see an opportunity to pinpoint particular sectors and particular congressional districts in a way that, oh, this is going to affect this, is going to affect that. This is a big mess. Let me just say this. And maybe it's too simplistic, and I think it's ill-advised, and I think it's not the right way to negotiate with anybody at this time. I'm not suggesting that nothing should be done, because, as I indicated before, there are real issues that need to be addressed when it's about certain Chinese practices, or about the 270% tariff on dairy products from Canada to protect to how can I say to satisfy the voters in Quebec or other. In other words, there are issues. What I suggest humbly is that an all-out trade war with everybody saying we're tired of losing jobs, when the United States is at an all-time high in terms of total employment and all-time low in terms of unemployment, it's not particularly convincing to me, at least as an observer. So are there issues? Yes. Is this the best modality to address them? I don't think so.
We're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank all our guests for being on the broadcast. That is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Mike Walter in Washington, D.C. Thanks so much for joining us.